To frame up today's conversation, I wanted to do a quick recap of the underlying principles that our team has come up with to help put you in a position to be as effective as you possibly can on this really difficult problem. Okay. And these principles are broadly applicable. We recognize the vast amount of local nuance and details when it comes to coming up with management prescriptions. But there are some fundamental underlying principles to tackling these invasive problems, not just invasive annuals, but other invasive species that we've really brought together in this package to help you formulate a plan that won't just be dependent on the latest tools and technology, but that really leans into our deep scientific and knowledge base on how to tackle invasive species problems effectively. So as a quick reminder, those of you who might have heard about the sagebrush conservation design, this was an assessment of the sagebrush biome and how we're doing over the last 20 years. The report card wasn't great. We continue to lose 1.3 million acres per year of our most intact sagebrush rangelands in the West, and they're being degraded due to a wide variety of factors. But we broke down kind of the primary drivers, the threats resulting in that lost ecological integrity. And what we found was really stunning. Annual grasses are by far the biggest reason for that degradation of our ecosystem integrity. And so it really put squarely in our focus the importance of rallying the whole community to elevate this issue and take on invasion problems head on in order to save the biome. Because as you know, if you've been working here a while, we've actually done a lot of great work over 15, 20, 30 years in the sagebrush biome for sage grouse and other specific conservation efforts. Some have called it the largest conservation effort in US history, but yet we still continue to lose ground. So what we're having to confront is that business as usual won't save the biome. We need to start asking ourselves, are we just rearranging furniture in a house that's burning down, telling ourselves it's okay? We have a lot of really great local successes happening all over the biome, including in my backyard here in Oregon where I work. And we know those things are resulting in important outcomes. But when you take a global look at the state of the biome, we're losing ground. And so we need to start potentially changing how we're delivering our strategic conservation and restoration efforts. And so we brought together a diverse team and looked across multiple disciplines, including invasive species and weed management, landscape and spatial ecology, and even social science to bring forward what we believe to be these foundational 5 principles that will be embedded throughout all of the concepts we're talking about today. And I'm going to walk through each one of these more specifically. But these 5 principles include acting proactively, leveraging ecology, considering landscape context, working together, and staying committed. You've all heard the adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, that's really embedded in our first principle of acting proactively. And this has a deep history in invasive species management 101 that tells us we're going to be far more effective and cost efficient if we can tackle invasions early, before they become more widespread and potentially reach a tipping point where we lose desired vegetation and get stuck in this state that's really hard to come back from. So our message here is don't wait to end up in the emergency room. Look for opportunities to be proactive and provide that preventative care to the land to keep it healthy. And the great news is, while our invasive species are widespread, especially cheatgrass in the biome, it's not too late to act. We still have a large amount of land in every corner of the biome that still supports low amounts of invasive annuals. The green here is, relatively low amounts, like 5 to 10% cover. So we have an opportunity to find those places and be proactive if we choose to make a change in how we're strategically investing today. Moving along to our next principle, leveraging ecology. And we're talking about using the ecology and biology of both our invasive annual plants and our desired native perennial plants, especially those perennial grasses, which are kind of the iceberg of our rangelands. And we want to use our knowledge and science and information on that to tip the scales in favor of our perennial plants, knowing that invasive grass pressure is going to be around for the foreseeable future. And so our best defense long term is really leaning into the invasive or the perennial plants that we have on the landscape and benefiting them through our management actions and really targeting and trying to break the life cycle of our invasive annual grasses. An example of that would be, not just treating the standing crop of cheatgrass or other invasive grasses, but thinking about how that life cycle works, how it's able to propagate and outcompete our perennial plants. And that really comes down to thinking about the seed bank and seedling competition issues. And so if we start to incorporate that into our management prescriptions, we believe that will be another ingredient to success long term. Our next principle, consider landscape context. This is really bringing in a relatively new science of landscape ecology, asking us to pick our heads up from our boots when we're on the ground and look across the landscape and think about what is the context in which you're developing your management plan. And the reason is invasion problems, like other resource problems, are spatially contagious. In other words, what's happening on your neighbor's property affects you. And so you can't just do management in isolation. You'll hear us talk a lot about cores. What we mean by that is this idea of finding your most intact, healthy ground that's relatively free of invasion, starting there with your preventative management before moving out and growing those cores through much more difficult restoration and management actions, right? So instead of chasing the ambulance to the worst spot where problems are obvious, let's go to and find our intact cores and really work to defend your core in your backyard over time. Our fourth principle is we've got to work together. This problem is bigger than we have the capacity to solve. And so we're going to have to make some strategic and tough decisions about which places we think we can save together. And because of the patchwork of the West, public and private lands, we need to come together and work across boundaries. And we need to bring in not just the ecological condition in terms of our cores, but also those other values. Where are the most important places from a wildlife or agricultural perspective, from a recreation perspective, that we want to try to make a stand over time? We also need to address the reality of administrative barriers that might be in place to doing work, and to build cultural will and landowner cooperation in a community to make this happen in a sustainable way through time. And that brings us to our final principle of just staying committed. There is no one-time fix here. So we really need to take the long-term view. We're borrowing our mental model here from Dr. Chad Boyd and ARS in Burns, Oregon, who's laid out this thought process for how to think about what we're doing. And that includes first maintaining those areas where we have the most to lose, what we're calling defend your core. Identify them, bring the community together, work to maintain those places, keep them from slipping further into degradation. Then strategically improve those areas where success is most likely. And this is using our knowledge of the abiotic and biotic things that drive invasion risk and recovery, and look for places with higher recovery potential to target first, because we have limited resources and we want to try to maximize our efficacy. And the last piece of the story is, unfortunately, there are going to be places that are too far gone. And we may just take a strategy of containment and changing our expectations about what we want to see on those places. These could be places that are a priority for fuels management, fire management, to keep those problems from spreading onto our other parts of the landscape. Just wrapping up here, we have a more descriptive handout in your packet if you want some more information on these principles, but just keep these 5 big ideas in mind throughout the day and see how they come into play. And I'd encourage you to go back to them as you're developing your own local plans, because we do know that there's a lot of very nuanced information that will change depending on where you're at. But these principles will help put you in a position to be effective long term. So with that, Claire, I'll turn it back over to you.
So our question for the principles is, which of the 5 principles do you think is the most difficult to implement? Looks like we got 2 front runners, specifically acting proactively and staying committed. If I had to choose one, I definitely would staying committed, because it's a long haul that you're gonna have to stay committed to managing invasive annual grasses. Would be definitely probably my choice, but definitely acting proactively as well. So